All right, so today we're diving into LeBron James and low-carb diets.
Yeah.
We found a bunch of articles about this, even a YouTube video. And honestly, what we found is pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's fascinating how much LeBron's journey with carbs reflects how sports nutrition thinking has changed. Like, for so long, high carb was just the rule.
Oh, yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't that long ago
Yeah.
that everybody just assumed that every athlete needed a ton of carbs to be able to play.
Yeah.
And then, like all of a sudden in August 2014, LeBron just like drops all this weight on a low-carb plan. Like no sugar, no dairy or anything. It was everywhere in the news. Like just meat, fish, veggies, and fruit for 67 days.
Wow. Yeah, and he lost like, what was it, 15 to 20 pounds, I think.
Yeah.
And felt like way lighter and faster. And everyone was wondering if
Yeah.
like this was going to be the future of how athletes trained.
Right. And he even said that he had the Cookie Monster chasing him in his dreams. Like, that's low carb for you. It puts you in ketosis.
Right.
And that means that your body starts burning fat instead of glucose for energy.
Yeah, exactly. And, that switch can have some benefits, especially weight loss, which we definitely saw with LeBron. And there's also research, like from Dr. Jeff Volek, that shows that there might be other potential benefits, like improved recovery and even mental clarity.
Huh. That's interesting.
Huh.
Doesn't it seem kind of intense to just completely cut out like a whole food group? Like carbs? Like, what about the risks of doing something like that?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely some things to be concerned about, like eating too much saturated fat.
Yeah.
And you could potentially have some cholesterol issues, and you have to really, really carefully monitor your blood sugar, especially if you're an athlete who needs to have consistent energy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And you have someone like Dr. Kate Shanahan, who works with the Lakers, who is totally all about low-carb, low-sugar diets for athletes. And she's pointed out that athletes who like rely on sugar for energy, they a lot of times will crash after halftime. When their adrenaline drops,
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting observation. But then you also have other people, like Lindsay Langford, who's a dietitian with the Pacers, who are a lot more cautious about low-carb diets, especially for athletes. Yeah. Because of all those risks that we were talking about. So yeah, careful monitoring is super important.
yeah, for sure. So where is LeBron with all of this now? It's been a while since that 2014 experiment.
Yeah, he's definitely changed his thinking since then. Like by 2016, he was talking about ramping up carbs during the season to fuel his games. He actually said the carbs help because you're going out and playing a lot of minutes.
Yeah, you definitely can't be running up and down the court for that long without some serious fuel. And it's not just about the game itself, but also recovering after.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And his trainer, Mike Mancias, is super focused on recovery. And he uses a plant-based protein powder in LeBron's post-game shake.
Oh, wow. Now that is interesting, plant-based protein. I wonder if that's connected to all the stuff we were talking about earlier with the anti-inflammatory benefits.
That's a good question. It might be. Plant-based diets are usually linked with less inflammation, which could theoretically help with recovery.
Right. Maybe LeBron should check out that documentary. What was it called? The Game Changers.
Oh,
It's all about athletes eating plant-based diets.
that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really highlights how plant-based nutrition could affect performance and recovery.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. LeBron is 35.
Yeah.
And he's still like dominating in the NBA.
Yeah.
Leading in assists and scoring high up there. I wonder if his focus on recovery and his higher carb diet are part of how he's been able to stay at this level for so long.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. And this actually makes me think of something interesting that wasn't in any of the stuff you sent me, but it's related to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
A few years ago, the Lakers were experimenting with a high-fat diet for their players. It wasn't exactly low carb, but it really like changed things up when it came to traditional sports nutrition.
Wait, high fat for basketball players. Doesn't that sound like, I don't know, like it's going to clog their arteries or something? What was the thinking there?
Oh, they were trying to do something kind of similar to the keto diet, but instead of like drastically cutting carbs, they just like loaded up on healthy fats. The goal was to get the players to start burning fat as like their main fuel source.
Oh.
So,
Did it work? Did the Lakers turn into like some kind of high fat, high performance machine, or what happened?
well, the articles I read didn't really say anything about how it affected how they played, but their season that year wasn't that great, so it's really hard to say for sure if the diet had anything to do with it.
Interesting. I guess it just goes to show that like teams are always trying to find ways to get better, trying to optimize their performance and how they recover, even if it means doing something that seems kind of out there, kind of like what LeBron did back in 2014.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of LeBron's low carb experiment, there was actually this one detail in one of the articles that caught my attention. It mentioned that he actually did eat some carbs during that time.
Oh, really? I thought it was like totally zero carbs, like hardcore mode.
Yeah, he actually specifically talked about eating fruits and vegetables, and those do have carbs, so it wasn't technically zero carbs.
Right. I guess that makes sense, like we were talking about before. Going completely carb-free, especially as an athlete, can be pretty risky.
Yeah, it really shows that like there isn't just one way to do things. It's all about finding what works best for you, finding that balance that you need to reach your goals.
Yeah. And LeBron's whole journey really shows that. Like, he's not afraid to try new things, to adapt based on what his body needs.
Right. He's like constantly trying to get better. And he's not afraid to challenge the way things are usually done, which, by the way, is a great lesson for anyone listening, whether you're an athlete or just trying to eat healthier.
So, like, forget about all the crazy diet fads out there. Pay attention to what your body is telling you and find what works for you.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the science behind it, the good stuff and the bad stuff, and then using that knowledge to make good choices for your own situation.
Right. And don't forget about recovery. That's something that both LeBron and his trainer really emphasize. It's not just about what you do in the gym or on the court, but also how you recover after.
Totally agree. It doesn't matter if you're a pro athlete or just work out on the weekends. You got to prioritize recovery, like getting enough sleep, managing your stress levels, giving your body what it needs to recharge. You'll see positive results in like all parts of your life.
Okay. And speaking of recovery, we were just talking about how LeBron's trainer uses plant-based protein in his post-game shake. What do you think? Could a fully plant-based diet be the next step for him? We were seeing more and more athletes going plant-based.
That's a really interesting question. There's actually a lot of research out there that suggests that plant-based diets could be super beneficial for athletes, not just for recovery, but also for overall health and performance.
Right. I mean, plant-based foods have a ton of nutrients and antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds.
And they tend to be lower in saturated fat and cholesterol, which is good for your heart. And something else to think about, they're better for the environment, which is something that a lot of athletes care about these days.
So it seems like, from a performance standpoint, and from a health standpoint, and from an environmental standpoint, there's a good case to be made for LeBron to at least try a plant-based diet. It would be a pretty big move.
Yeah, it would. But knowing LeBron and how he's always trying to do things differently and challenge how things are usually done, it wouldn't be totally surprising. And imagine how big of an impact it would make if he did switch. It could inspire so many of his fans to try eating plant-based too.
Yeah, it would totally change the game. But even if he doesn't go fully plant-based, his whole journey with carbs has a lot of important lessons for us.
Definitely. It shows that what your body needs can change as you get older, and we should be flexible about that, just like LeBron. And it also reminds us that there isn't just one way to eat that's right for everyone. What works for one athlete might not work for another.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, hey, look, I'm always learning and experimenting and changing things up. You can do that too.
Right. It's all about being open to new information and trying to find what works for you. And it reminds us that no matter who we are, whether we're elite athletes or just trying to live healthier lives, recovery is so important.
Yeah. So what does all this mean for like the average person listening, someone who's not trying to be a basketball star, but still wants to eat healthy?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Forget about all the strict rules about dieting. There's no one right way to eat. Even LeBron James, one of the greatest athletes of all time, has had to try different things and adjust his diet to figure out what works best for him.
Right. So it's really about paying attention to your own body and figuring out what makes you feel good and perform well and recover quickly.
Exactly. And it's not just about food either. Recovery is about sleep and managing stress and giving your body what it needs to recharge and rebuild.
So maybe we can all learn something from LeBron. Be open to trying new things and adapting and prioritizing recovery. Oh, and maybe be a little more open-minded about those plant-based foods.
Yeah, for sure. They're not just for athletes. They're full of nutrients that can benefit everyone. And you might even find some new foods that you love.
All right, so we've done a deep dive into LeBron James and low-carb diets, from his early experiments to his current approach with more carbs and plant-based protein. It's been a really interesting journey, and I hope you've learned something new about how to fuel your own body.
Absolutely. The biggest takeaway is that there's always more to learn and more to explore when it comes to optimizing your health and well-being.
So keep learning and keep experimenting and keep listening to your body and keep pushing yourself to be the best version of you on and off the court.